Rosanna? Hello, Rosanna. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Sam Sugar. I'm recording a victim video today. It's January 9th, 2019. And tonight we have the pleasure of speaking to Rosanna Miller. Rosanna, how are you tonight?
As well as can be expected.
Good. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit of your background.
Well, I've just I live in Ohio, and the story that I'm going to present is started 12 years ago. It's a long time, but
And you've been fighting this for 12 years, right?
yeah,
This being the guardianship of whom exactly?
my father.
Can you tell us how that guardianship got started 12 years ago?
Sure, the death of my mother. She was his caretaker. My mother did everything for them, and she was his caretaker. And her death is still open, ongoing in the police department. It's still an open case. So when she was put out of the picture, I needed to get guardianship of my father because I knew he had dementia. I knew he couldn't handle his finances. My dad couldn't use a phone book. Literally, I'm not making that up. I'm not trying to be mean or cruel. It's just, you know, he couldn't handle his finances. So
So
that's
he was actually in need of a guardianship, and you expected that applying to be his guardian would be a good thing and a helpful thing, right?
well, I expected it because my parents had every bit of their legal documents all prepared in place. Nice binder with a zipper on it. It's a beautiful piece of work. They're all there, everything.
And I presume that wasn't free either.
No, of course not. We
Paid
paid
good money.
we paid the judicial branch to do that.
Right.
And
So you applied for guardianship, and then what happened?
it drug out for years. Um, since my father's passing, I found out that the guardian ad litem, Howard Trawl, was dipping into the trust accounts, which he has no authority to be doing. And I found out a lot of things since my father's passing, but it just drug out for years. The flurry of motions that they go through and the dragging out, and this left the suspect of my mother's death in the house with my father, um, because that's who was in there when she passed. And
And what do you think was the reason that this was dragged out for so long in such large amounts of litigation?
money.
Well, but what I mean is, what's the excuse? Was there a problem? Were you accused of doing something wrong? What was that about?
Well, you got to get this test, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. I mean, it's just a cycle that these people are not in a hurry because it makes attorneys money to stay in there.
And speaking of attorneys and money, over these 12 years, how much money has been spent by you on attorneys and how much has disappeared from the estate on attorneys?
Well, my personal savings that I worked for all my life is gone. I mean, I used it to try to save dad when dad ended up being abused and then murdered in the end, really. And then,
Uh, what you say he was murdered, that's a very strong accusation. Do you want to go into a little more detail on that?
for the last 3 years of my dad's life, he was held at the Campbell place against his will. He's trying to kill himself. We have police reports on this. And he could have been living at home. He had a healthcare power of attorney. And so they held him there and they drugged him because he was trying to kill himself. They don't want to deal with that. So they're drugging him on all these psychotropic drugs. And I have some of the Mars sheets. I know what he was given. Um, and then at the end, my sister finally got guardianship of my dad for the last 2 months of his life. And she said, no more morphine, no more morphine. This previous guardian had put my dad on hospice. That's where you get the morphine. And when she got guardianship the last 2 months, she said no more, took him off, and the judge removed her. Listen to this. The judge removed her. He turned around and put my dad on hospice, ordered him on hospice. Now, my dad didn't have a terminal illness. He didn't have a terminal illness. He had dementia, but he didn't have a terminal illness. Put him on hospice, and dad was dead 9 days later, and there was no morphine in his body, but there was cyanide.
Just to repeat that, a toxicology test done post-mortem indicated there was no morphine or morphine residue in his blood, but there was traces of cyanide. What does that mean to you?
Just what I said. That's murder to me.
And what did you do when you found out about this murder, this alleged murder?
Well, my sister and I went to the police department. We filed reports. By the way, you can see a lot of this on my webpage. I do have a webpage that's got all of this on there for the people who are interested in elder murder, abuse, and exploitation, and they can go there. They can see a lot of what I filed, where I've been, what's come in. So
let me repeat that, because we're having a little trouble with your audio. That's elder abuse and exploitation?
Elder murder, abuse, and exploitation.
Elder murder, abuse, and exploitation.com?
Yeah, that's fine. If you just put that elder murder, abuse, and exploitation in your web browser, it'll pop up.
Okay. So how did this situation with your father affect you? What happened after he died?
Well, just like mom. I mean, how does anybody go through that? I mean, this has torn my whole world apart, and these people just don't care. They have no, I don't know, it's like there's no blood flowing through their veins at all. And you know what's interesting, Dr. Sugar, is the law enforcement, the prosecutor, all these judges, these attorneys, they all knew from day one when my mom went down, Dad could not handle his finances or his affairs, and that's what the psych valves came back and said too. I was right. I mean, I have to say, I was right. Everything backed me up. It was, legit. And so I've lost two parents. The theft of all these assets is just, there is no accountability in the judicial branch. There really isn't. And the high courts of the state are not going to make them comply. They're not going to.
Let me ask you, how much money has disappeared from all accounts, and how much has been spent on this industry?
Well, in our assets, there was a trust, okay? And rounding this off with the house that they're now trying to take, I'm going to, $750,000. It's just $450,000 for the first 6 years is completely unaccounted for. Completely unaccounted. There's nothing to show for it. That includes a 1969 Firebird that's worth $90,000 to $176,000. It's missing. It's been missing all these years.
So I know, because you and I have spoken in the past, that you are a very talented researcher, and you have taken some steps to try to not only reconcile what happened to you, but to try to help others as well. Talk to us a little bit about your research into commercial law.
Well, I found out a lot about that. Underneath the uniform commercial codes of our states and the federal, it's interesting because power of attorneys, whether they're healthcare or general durable, there's different kind of financial power of attorney. There's general durable, springing, so there's different, but they are all underneath uniform commercial code, which we all want to know why, when there's power of attorneys and there's family members or whatever directed to be these guardians, why is the judges not holding these? Because that's principal agent law. And underneath that, people can be sued in the general division. So they want to get rid of those as fast as possible. That's why the judges put in their friends, and now the power of attorneys are gone because the guardian usurps the power of attorney. And now they're thrown into REM, which is probate. Now they can do whatever they want to do.
So for our audience that isn't familiar with this, we're talking about different variations of American law and business law. And guardianship occurs in something called REM, REM, not REM sleep, but REM, which means dealing with the thing. And there are different rules uh, for situations in REM than in the law. And what you're saying is that there are contracts like fiduciary contracts that exist in the law that need to be wiped out by these judges. In other words, they need to get rid of advance directives and any pre-needs documents in order to flip their jurisdiction into their bailiwick, which is called in REM, where they have absolute total control outside the commercial laws, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's an opening for people. Tell us more about what you've been doing.
Well, the thing, what we all know is whether it's an estate or you have an administrator and the judge has put his friend in to be that administrator, or a guardianship where the judge's friend, the attorney, is now the guardian of the ward, they have to have bonds. And everybody knows this. And guess who pays for those bonds? The ward while they're alive, or the beneficiary of the estate, or the beneficiary of when that ward passes. So
right.
the people who are to inherit are giving up their money to these administrators or guardians in these bond insurance policies. Actually, we are paying the bonds to protect the guardians or the administrators to steal our assets.
Right. And in the state of Florida, I'd like to add, because I've done some research on this too, the beneficiary of the bonds is the governor of the state of Florida. It's not the family.
I noticed that. I was looking on some of those.
The bonds of guardians and judges, for that matter, because judges have to have bonds too, the beneficiary of those bonds is not the family that's paying for them. It's the governor of the state of Florida, which is insanity. And the reason they have that is in case a guardian misbehaves and someone tries to sue the state, which is actually running this industry, which of course we all know can't happen because of eminent domain. It's another racket.
Right. All of these people have a horse in the race. They all have a horse in the race. We're not going to get justice this way. When somebody has a horse in the race, they've got their own self-serving interest, and they can't police themselves.
No, it's very clear that there's zero expectations from any of us who've experienced this that the state will ever reform itself.
So what we need to do is we need to file to these bond companies. Now, the bond companies are going to want the judges to call the administrator or the guardian a bad boy, find guilty against him, but that's not going to happen. And these insurance companies need to be put on notice that we are paying for this bond, and we're paying for it while our asset, our inheritance is being stolen from us. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And somebody needs to step up, and they can, by the way, they can do investigations if they want. So
however, it's important to add that this doesn't happen for free. And if somebody claims on a bond, they can expect that the bond's lawyers will start their meter running as well. And if you claim on a bond and lose your claim, they can make you, the person who claimed on it, responsible for the fees of the lawyer of the bond company. So it's a catch-22.
Well, then they need to explain where $450,000 is at without any accounting for it. I mean, tell me that, I might have to pay their fees for looking into it. Well, then they better have they better have a daggone good answer. You know what I mean? And they haven't come up with it so far in 12 years.
Right. And you have been trying to take this approach for some time. And I know that it's an area of great interest for people who don't have any other recourse or availability of redress for their grievances. I want to switch away from that for a minute. You're obviously a very bright woman. What impact has the guardianship, shall I say racket, or shall I say industry?
Racket.
I'll
It's
be
an
nice and
absolute
say
name.
industry. What impact has it had on you and your immediate family in terms of your well-being and your mental health? Talk about that.
Well, and first of all, it is an enterprise. I think we can agree it is an enterprise. But well, I mean, it severs, it makes problems between even the people who are getting along. It can just cause controversy because they're not settling this. You know, everybody wants it resolved. It's putting tension and stress on everybody. You can't live. My parents have been taken from me in a most egregious way, and there's no accounting for this when they all know what happened. How does anybody live with this? I know it's affected my health, and it's dipped into my assets that I've worked for all my life. Um, it's just a gross injustice to watch some of these criminals, and some of them are criminals, get away with this, and everybody's covering up for them. It is like the new American Holocaust. If you know anything about what happened in Germany with Hitler and the Jews, what they're doing to the elderly right now is just as egregious. It, and we're supposed to know better. Our country's supposed to be of freedom, life, liberty, and property. Where is that? How is that happening? So,
What would you say? What advice would you give to someone in a family who is thinking that they ought to go and apply for a guardianship for a parent because there's a dispute about inheritance or money or whatever? What would you tell them?
well, I know an officer that told me, he says, you would have been better off to just take care of the problem yourself. And you know what? I have a higher power that I have to answer to, and I can't do that. But everybody better stop and think. I'm telling any court situation, stay out of the courts, period. It does not necessarily just probate. They're all, this is going like a wildfire across the country. They're all in bad. I mean, they just don't want to follow the law. If I have to reduce this all down, this all comes down to picking and choosing whether they want to honor that law this day or not. If they like you, if they don't like you, who's in front of them, that's what it all comes down to. There's no blinders on Lady Justice anymore. She's not wearing those. So,
Well, Rosanna, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. You've given us a lot of food for thought. Um, and I hope that going forward, your efforts are successful and that your ideas can help a lot of other people who are involved in this nightmare of a guardianship. Thank you.
can I add one other thing?
You bet.
Just one other thing. The way the judge got away with putting my father on hospice without a terminal illness is because of ORC, and this is very important for Ohio, ORC 2111.50. That gives that court the right to do anything, and I mean anything they want with the ward. And I'm telling you, we need to jump on our representative's door and get that code amended. I shouldn't say that. We need to have it removed.
Yeah. And just for everyone's information, there are similar either statutes or probate laws in every state that do exactly the same thing, giving these judges complete latitude to do whatever it is they feel like doing for any reason they can think of. And when you have a profit-based system and a greed-based system, bad things can happen. Rosanna,
Absolutely.
thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I stopped the recording.